lot of organizations do a lot, but it's not enough. The need is greater than the capacity to handle it. And we need to educate people because communities can help solve some of these problems by working together within the community itself, finding out which neighbors a child can go to as a safe place if they're in trouble and mom's at work, which neighbors will open their door and take in the little neighbor kids, and it'll be the safe house for the little neighbor kids whose moms work. People can get together and they can help themselves. They can actually return to some sort of tribal living in forming a tribal community within a neighborhood for a safe house, for a grandma. In Oakland, there was a program, and I love this program. The old ladies in the neighborhood were lonely because they didn't have the money, their kids never came to see them, and they didn't have anything to do that they could do. So they developed an Adopt a Grandma program. So the grandma would go to her adopted family, usually within just 2 or 3 houses away because she couldn't walk very far, and rock the baby while mom did the housework. And tell a story to the little girl because mom was a working mom and mom had to come home and do the housework and didn't have time with the kids. And it gave the grandma great value and purpose to live. And it gave the kids the attention they needed because it was an Adopt a Grandma program. And they did the same thing with an Adopt a Grandpa program with the little boys, but the parent was right there. All the grandparent that was adopted did is spend time right there where mom and dad were, or dad was, a family adult was, working to clean up the house, prepare for the next day, and give that child one-on-one personal loving attention, which in turn made them feel loved. When we were tribal, we did that. Now we go inside, pull down the shutters and lock the doors and turn on the TV and pretend that the rest of the world is a million miles away. If we hear somebody scream, we don't want to look out. What happened with our capacity to care about each other?
Well, what happened was that families started separating. Well, before you had it, when you had that community living, which is a little bit different than the community that we grew up with, in those communal environments, it was pretty much all family. You would have the family unit, and at the top of the family unit was the matriarch. Usually the women outlived the men. And that everybody helped take care of everyone in that community. It was, it takes a community to raise a child. And well, what happened is that families started moving away from each other. So that just didn't happen anymore. When you had the grandparents and the kids were born, the kids moved a block away, or they lived in the same little neighborhood, you had that. As our country spread apart, people don't live with their parents anymore. They don't live with their grandparents anymore.
That's very true.
So that's just what happened. The kids would grow up and move to the city, and the grandparents stayed in the country. So very few people actually live near their parents.
I understand that, but they don't have to be related. They have to be people of integrity. Maybe they should get to know their neighbors.
Exactly.
And find out who those people are and start relying on one another for somebody to call, somebody to look in on, somebody to see if they're sick or old. Because that sick old grandpa or grandma who rocks that baby finally has somebody to check on them now and then. It's reciprocal.
Right. And this idea of community doesn't really exist that much. And I know from my own experience, the street that I live on, I love that my kids go to a community school. I know who their friends are. I know where they live. Their parents live across the street. My kids play with kids on the same block. I love that. And I know that if I can't pick my kids up from school, I have a list of other parents who live on my block that can pick up my kids from school.
That's community.
Yeah, that's community. And we have just forgotten how that looks and what that looks like. And it's a very, very valuable. My kids love that they can walk across the street to a friend's house.
I think we need to get back to community. That's something we can all do. We all live in the neighborhood of some kind. And we all pretty much know or can find out which neighbors we can trust and which we can't, who we can believe in and who we can't, who's going to watch out for us or watch our house when we're gone or anything else. And we need to get back to that because our children are suffering behind locked doors, watching television with who knows what's on it, growing up alone as latchkey kids without the attention, the time, and the love that they need. A mom comes home or a single dad worn to a nub, doesn't feel like having any time with the children. They're worn out, and everybody suffers.
Right.
So a child's rights should be to grow up in love and safety. That's what they should be. Love and safety. That's really hard for a single parent to provide. We could do more through every single organization in our communities if we cared to.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a grassroots thing. We need to come back home to the grassroots community.
Right.
And when we see a violation against a child, don't turn your back and lock your door and refuse to acknowledge it because you don't want to be inconvenienced by the hatred of the neighbor that you caught. That's what's happening. I have had people tell me that they told their mother that they were sexually molested, and she said, "Don't say anything. What will the neighbors think? Be quiet. It will destroy our family."
Yeah. Because they're so concerned about what the neighbors think. That's
Right.
astounding to me.
Right.
That a child's well-being is sacrificed for the opinions of the neighbors.
Yes, or the child molester must be ignored because I'm afraid he might retaliate. This is where neighbors come in. You form your own band of neighbors, your own community of neighbors. And you don't have to belong to the same church or the same group. You just have to have the same integrity.
Yeah,
It's so
absolutely.
important.
It's a subject matter you know a lot about. And I'm very pleased to see that you're so passionate about it. And you present some ideas that I'd never considered. For me, that's kind of what I do because I see how much joy we get in having these amazing neighbors that I trust,
Right.
that I know so well, which I know is unusual for a random street in Southern California for the neighbors to all know each other so well. And there's tremendous value in that.
Yes, there is.
You know, I know that if anything happens to me or I need something, there are people right there on my street that I can count on, no matter what.
Right.
And that's very valuable to have that.
It is.
They look after my kids as if they were their own kids.
Right. So you don't have to be related to form a neighborhood family or group or tribe.
Yeah.
It's just natural.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. If you leave your house and you knock on your neighbor's door and introduce yourself,
Yes,
it works wonders.
it does.
Actually turns out that your neighbors actually really do want to meet you.
Right.
And all you need to do is just take that initiative to walk out your house and go introduce yourself to the neighbors. Walk up and down the street. Hi, I'm so-and-so.
Right.
Just thought I'd stop down and I see you're new to the neighborhood. Just wanted to come and introduce myself. Oh my gosh, people love that.
Well, sure. They want to know who their neighbors are, and they want to know their neighbors care.
We all do. I mean, ultimately, that's one of the things as, you know, the human animal that we are.
Right.
We want to know whether people care.
The thing is, if you know who your neighbors are, and they know who you are, and who your children are, then they know, and your children know, where they can run to if they're frightened and somebody's scaring them or anything else, and you're not home. And you know that their child can come to you. In some neighborhoods, they literally appoint a safe house every so much down the block for kids in neighborhoods for this thing. It's a customary thing to do. It's part of a program under Neighborhood Watch.
It's a great idea. It's absolutely brilliant.
It isn't just looking out for criminal activity. It's looking out for a unity in creating a tribe of support that we instinctively would have if we were still tribal.
Right, and I think part of that is being aware if you see any kind of child abuse going on.
Right.
At what point do we just set aside our consciousness and say, "Oh, that's somebody else's problem"?
Right.
If you know that a child is being abused, it's to me that conscious responsibility to report it.
It is. And I've actually talked to women that knew that a neighbor was abusing a child and were afraid of retaliation and never said a word.
Well, you actually can report it and remain anonymous.
Yes, you can.
You know?
And the interesting thing about it is if a woman were that frightened, she really needs her tribal neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
She really does. She needs it and everybody else needs it because something's going on that shouldn't be going on. And the courage to stop it's got to come from somewhere. To ignore it doesn't make it go away, it makes it grow.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people really believe that to ignore something is to condone it.
Right, and I'm inclined to agree.
Right.
You know, looking at something that's going on. If you're watching an abuse and not doing anything about it, that isn't any different than being an accessory to it.
Right.